for clicking. Welcome to my channel. I'm Darren, and I want to tell you a story you don't hear very often. I see YouTube videos and YouTube channels and a lot of guitar channels and music channels that talk about all the success that happened in the 80s with the hair bands and then the metal bands, etc., and then how it worked its way into the grunge era of the 90s, where people kind of started falling off a little bit with the hair metal. And you always hear these stories, and these stories are always from like Alice in Chains or the band that almost made it, Britney Fox or one of these other hair bands that they were on the cusp, but because grunge kind of took over, they kind of got lost in the mix. Well, that's not all that really got lost in the mix in that era. There's a group of people, myself of course included, and that's why I'm telling this, that we were musicians that grew up listening to the 70s. I mean, I was born in the 70s. So 71, I grew up listening to the oldies channels, listening to, the pop channels, all the music that they were playing back in the 70s and the 80s. And then, of course, once you started hearing Motley Crue and on MTV and all these hair metal bands, and then Metallica starts creeping in, as you're growing up listening to that. And it's like, whoa, man, this is what I want to do, man. This is cool. I mean, these guys they're doing things that weren't really being done until the 80s. I mean, they started earlier, obviously, when you talk about Black Sabbath and the beginning of heavy metal, but I'm talking about the actual primo time for heavy metal, which was the 80s. I mean, I don't think anybody would argue too much that it wasn't the beginning, but it was the primo time. So anyway, so now you have a group of people like myself that I wanted to do this. This is great music, so I started playing guitar. Uh, and, of course, I had friends and we kind of played around together, getting our music, learning the guitar, learning he was playing the bass, I was learning guitar. We meet some guy and he wanted to sing and, and that's kind of, the whole organic thing of how bands kind of start. But we were in this weird area because I graduated in 1989, 18, so I started playing guitar at 18. So I didn't really start getting anywhere I could, proficiently play music, play songs for a couple more years, but the whole time I'm listening to what I grew up with. So I'm listening to that, my friends are listening to that, and here we are, right? All of a sudden now, many years later into the 90s, I'm forming a band where we're really wanting to do this. Like, wow, man, I mean, if they can do it, why can't we, right? I mean, that's the dream, the rock and roll dream. The problem was in we got stuck in the middle because we were ready to burst out with energy to bring our version of metal. We were ready to, and at the time, like in the mid '80s, around where I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, they had a circuit, and you would have bands that would follow that circuit from Indianapolis to Cincinnati to Columbus. But it was in this little tri-state area, and bands like Jackal actually came through, and they were on these circuits. And of course, these were bands that weren't quite signed yet, but they maybe could be. I mean, they were on the cusp. They were in this circuit. Well, after the '80s metal blow up, the circuit was gone. There was no circuit. There was nobody running a circuit. There was nothing to be done. So these places, these bars, these music venues, that's where we would play because now we had access to them. Because the big bands, the metal bands that were playing were kind of people weren't into grunge just yet. It was taking time. You didn't have, especially in rural Cincinnati areas, you just didn't have a lot of grunge type bands. They were bands like ours that grew up in our little area. And that was it. So we started playing those, playing bars, but we were not getting the crowds. And we, as a group, and I speak age group musicians like me and played in my situation, and other bands that we played with at the time. They were in the same situation, you know. So I feel like we got lost in the mix a little bit. So here you have metal energy out the wazoo, but you have a grunge sensibility creeping in, and there just wasn't a huge market. I mean, we played gigs, played for many years, but they was never anything more than going and playing and making just enough money to maybe put gas in the car and maybe buy some instruments or some new strings or whatever. We'd pull our money, try to, help the band. And and we did that for many, many years. And because that was just our style, that was just what we grew up on, and we missed it. Um, and just going from that, dropping to grunge, just wasn't going to cut it because, I mean, I don't get me wrong, I love grunge. I always, anything with a heavy sound to it, anything that, brings some kind of an emotion that grunge would bring out. And it was very similar to the metal, but of course without the fantastical guitar solos, without the speedy, zippy riffs and all the different. It was much simpler. Not that it's easier, that it was simpler. It was a different type of music. It was almost. I don't want to say metal slash pop joined together, maybe a little punk thrown in there, but it's, I mean, everybody had their own opinion. So, I mean, I went for years listening to the radio where I didn't even hear a guitar solo. Bands were just, they stopped doing guitar solos. So here you are. So now you've got these people in the 90s, these groups, all these other bands, and now here we are. We're in regular jobs. We've moved on. Never had our aha moments. I mean, there was always flickers, you know. All they talk about, having 15 minutes of fame, and I was in a band in the mid 90s called Confined, and we opened up for Overkill at Bogart's in Cincinnati on a fluke, and it was like, whoa, this is cool. Now, Overkill, for those of you who are really into metal, especially in the late 80s, they were like on the cusp. They weren't the big four, but if you had to stretch it to like five or six, they had to be right there. It's Overkill, and they represented their, the East Coast, as opposed to like Metallica and Megadeth and all them on the West Coast. So, but anyway, so that kind of, and then after playing on a stage like that, and then going back, and then again playing in bars and this and that, and you just there was a whole generation, I believe, of disenfranchised musicians that kind of just gave up. And I'm seeing a lot of people that look closer to my age now, showing themselves on YouTube playing guitar, like I've done, and I'm gonna probably do more, because you know what, we didn't have a chance back then. I mean, we I guess we could have. There were bands getting signed, but you had to be in the right place. You had to know the people. We were in Cincinnati, Ohio. So while Cincinnati has had its fair share of musicians that have made it big, um, I could name like Bootsy Collins, who was from Lincoln Heights here in Cincinnati, and even if you want to go boy band, Nick Lachey and or whatever, we've had with the Isley Brothers from, again, Lincoln Heights, and some recording studios, and then we've had some pretty big names here in Cincinnati. So there is a little bit of a musical culture. It just, back then it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to overcome this. Hey man, it's metal. I don't want metal anymore. And it's really ironic to see where metal is now today. I mean, don't get me started on AI. Well, maybe that's a subject I'll talk about someday. But right now, the state of music, I mean, I don't know. I see a lot of channels where they're analyzing the Wings of Pegasus, analyzing vocal performances live and vocal performances that aren't live, and comparing the two, and there's so much just digital trickery. But I think there's still a group of people out there that want to hear the mistakes, want to hear the flaws, want to hear not perfect. I love Yngwie Malmsteen. I love Marty Friedman. But sometimes that little bit of a mistake is what makes the song. Listen to Led Zeppelin. Listen to Jimmy Page. He is a sloppy guitar player, but that is what made him who he was. And now everybody looks at technical proficiency. You've got a lot of bands out there, and they're guitarists, don't get me wrong. Technically, wow, phenomenal. I couldn't come close. I'm not claiming to be anywhere near any of those type of people. But to me, I want more feeling, less mechanics. I don't know. Well, I hope you enjoyed this story. Maybe I'll have many more like it. I don't know. Tell me in the comments. Do you have a story like this? Where were you in those times? What were you doing? Were you playing? Do you have a story like mine? I don't know. If you did like this, please like, share, and subscribe. And I've got more to come, hopefully. So I'll see you maybe on the next video. I've got a lot planned. I'm fixing some guitars. I've got some more guitars that I'm going to work on. Some other projects. You can't keep my generation down, and I'm proving it right now. So I'm going to move forward, and hopefully you'll follow me. Thank you all, and I'll see you all in the next video.